And neighbors, it is Friday night again in North Carolina. Well, it's Friday night most everywhere that I know. And it is first day of a long 3-day weekend. So there is absolutely no excuse to not finishing the Pegasus this weekend. What we're going to do first is, and I've already done it, so you didn't have to listen to it, but I've plotted some more texture templates so that I can get back to making more multiple coats on the Pegasus. Now, one thing I'm going to do, since again it's still, the sun is out today, so it's been nice, but it's still cold. So windows closed, ventilation to a minimum. I'm going to stray away from using the enamel paints this weekend, and I'm going to go switch over to Tamiya's. I've got some chrome and some black and some metallic gray, so I think I got enough that I can mix together the shading that I want to do. And I'm going to be over there. I'm going to be, you can't see it from here, but I'm going to be over there spraying on the Pegasus. And here is our victim for the weekend. You can see where we last left off with a rather blotchy two-tone effect going on. And here are the paints that I am going to be using. Now, it's entirely possible I may have to run out tomorrow and pick up some more, but this is what we're going to start with. And what I was thinking of doing first was mixing up now that I've got this two-tone noise going on, I was going to maybe mix up a darker one and start laying in some darker patches. And then after that, we'll lay some highlight patches in, and we'll finish it all off with a blending coat of the original gunmetal. So let's get to it. Here is the Pegasus with first coat of the dark contrasting paint on there, and hopefully you can see what's going on. The light is kind of glaring it a bit. Let me see if I can get it out of the light there. You can see some dark accents on there. Now, an interesting problem with the Pegasus that I did not have with the Galactica and similar models is that it did not have, the other ones did not have as much surface detail, so the templates could lay flatter on the surface, which means your lines are sharper. Here, as much as I would pat them down, they would still rise up around some of these, let me get my finger in the screen, some of these raised panels, so I couldn't put the vinyl down as fully as I would have liked to. So you get a little bit of a softer image that way because you're not spraying through vinyl that's sitting right on the surface. But we'll make it work. Still a bit blotchy. It's going to be blotchy. I mean, that's the whole idea, is to have this look like it's broken up. You should get like an overall color from a distance, but the closer you get into it, the more detail you should see. So I'm going to let this dry, and then maybe a highlight coat, and then after the highlight coat, the blending coat. Good morning and welcome back to the Pegasus. It is Saturday morning, and I am going to start a highlighting coat now. I have had the darkened coat overnight to dry. Hopefully you can see, I keep saying hopefully a lot, but hopefully you can see what we're creating here with our darker and lighter coats of paint. Let me point out something here that I find interesting. Where is there it is. Right in here. This is probably a good example of what I'm shooting for. We've got overlapping lights and darks, and what that is doing is it's giving the faux impression of a lot more going on these panels than is actually going on. And I've got two distinct different, well, that's what distinct means. I've got two different patterns of plating that I am employing. Oh, there's some alliteration for you on a Saturday morning. That I am employing on this build. Here is one such sample, and you can see that that's, kind of chunky and boxy and sufficiently random, but always geometric. That it is all the angles are at right angles to each other. There's nothing funky going on there. And the second one is the smaller, longer, skinnier, what I'm calling a circuit board look. And what the circuit board look does is gives you the illusion of either pipes that might be going down the length of something, or the drop shadow of a larger panel, or in fact something that might look like a circuit. So I'm using that, and always either this orientation or this orientation, not any weird angles, but either up and down or that way, to give some crisscross looking detail. And now I'm going to use this particular one to do the what I call the highlighting, because I think the highlighting I want to keep to a minimum. I don't want any really big bold areas. Of what I'm going to use is the chrome silver, the Tamiya chrome silver, and I don't want any big boxes of chrome silver. I just want some highlights here and there. So I'm thinking that the longer, skinnier shapes are going to be what I want to use to do that. And I'm going to use it very sparingly. It's not going to be nearly as obvious or as numerous as what I did with the darkened panels. Another fun use for these templates is you could take, when you're taking the middle shapes out to make all the holes, all of those little shapes have to be plucked out. Well, what can you do with them? Well, you can do anything you want with them. What you can do on this ship, and I'll show you a couple of good examples. They're very obvious and sticking out here now because I want to show you. Is you take them and you can plop them down on the hull wherever you think there needs to be an additional detail. Now, I know that they've researched, the details on this pretty well, but there are some areas that I think really could use some more raised panels. Some places that are obviously flat that really could use it, that I think maybe they left off because of the molding process. Like right under there. You can tuck, focus. You could tuck a couple there. And I really noticed, especially on the arms here, on the insides of the landing bay arms, they're very flat. And you could paint some faux detail in there. I'm talking about well, this is kind of cumbersome to do with one hand while I'm filming. These areas right here, these sides are a little bit sparse, compared to everything else. They've got some raised panels, and it would be easy enough to stick some of these miscellaneous shapes, however you want to. Really, it's up to you. On those arms, boy, you can see some nasty seams going on there. I gotta dress those up. But you can, and since the material is fairly thin, they would be another level of detail because they're probably half as high, maybe a third as high as the other raised panels. So you could add your own level of detail with them, and then obviously you do that early on in the process so that you can paint over them. But this vinyl, once it's stuck down and covered with a couple coats of paint, it ain't going anywhere. So that's just so none of it goes to waste. You can use the outside perimeters to paint with, and you can use the inside shapes to add detail to the hull where you think it's lacking. Here's a good clean example of the chrome, what I'm calling the chrome coat. It is Tamiya chrome silver over top, and you can see how it's just adding. If this is the let's get somewhere. Here you go. This is the darker coat. Here is the result of the silver look. Let me see if I can move a light away from it. You can get a better idea. So you can see how that chrome coat is giving some highlight. Depending on how the light is hitting this, the fluorescent light overhead, you can see some of the highlights showing up, the more metallic silver highlights. Now, consciously leaving it off of some areas and accentuating other areas is what gives you this sense of scale. Come on, focus. There you go. I will knock this down with a blending coat of the original gunmetal to mist over it and kind of blend everything in together. And then paint in the details. Looking pretty good. And then of course I think the red accents on the bays are really going to help the whole thing pop. Welcome back. It is Saturday evening and I have sprayed yon beastie with a coat of satin clear to kind of lock in all of the layers of spray. And what I want to do now, before I can start painting the detail, is to give everything a one last light pass with the original gunmetal color that I used at the way back at the very start to kind of blend some of these bits together. And what it'll do is it will take down some of the harshness in the paneling, and that's the next step. Well, from here on out the work gets subtler and subtler, so I don't really know how well the video is showing the different steps that I'm doing now, but basically what I have just done is gone over the whole ship with the original gunmetal and kind of done a little bit of a light path of blending. And what I'm doing is trying to knock down, and it's not an even coat, it's not a plastering, trying to knock down some of the high contrast areas. In some cases that is bringing up overly dark areas, and some cases it is toning down some of the overly bright areas. But what I'm trying to do is create a happy medium that gives the effect of many plates, still doesn't lose the effect of seeing, you know, specific highlights and lowlights and shadows, but aims for a more homogeneous surface texture. And that's what I think I've got. Yay, it's Sunday morning, or Sunday afternoon. It's actually about 1:30. Not that you care. And it's time to do the final bits of painting on the Pegasus. You can see how it has been somewhat blended by the overall application of the gunmetal. And this brings up a very subjective point, but yet a point that I think is important. We all have a tendency to make models in our own little worlds with, you know, our own particular setups, and that's good and that's bad. I mean, if you're building something for yourself and it's going to be displayed in your house, then by all means, you know, make it to look good how it looks in your house. I can give you a couple horror stories about spending time, months and months, painting something and then taking it for competition, particularly at Wonderfest, but taking models for competition where the lighting conditions are completely different from how you're displaying it or how you're building it at home, and the colors you think are so dead on when they're on your bench have little to no basis in the real world. So what looks like a very dark kit here under these particular lights, I'm going to take outside and show you the difference. Okay, here is the same model under outside lighting conditions, and the colors are subtly different. Now, unfortunately, most models are never displayed outside, but you want to get an idea of what it looks like in natural sun. It's kind of, I mean, the sun is out, but I'm in a shady area, so it's not quite as bright as it would be if I put it out in the hot sun. But maybe that's a little bit better. But a lot of the things that I thought were too dark, when I brought them outside, were just fine. So, you know, take that with a grain of salt. Okay, here is the model in the bright sun. Now you can tell because it's casting a shadow. It's out in the sun. It looks a lot different than it does on my desk with a fluorescent light fixture shining on it. And the dark that I was afraid was too dark when I put outside looks just right. So this is pretty much it as a final finished overall texture color. I'm going to go in now and hit it with some dry brushing to highlight some spots. I'm going to finally put the little guns on it and paint the red stripes on the bays, and this will be a done kit. Ironically, seeing how a deep space ship looks in the sun is the final step. And we're back to my fluorescently lit workbench or work table. And the good news is we should be done with spraying and big elaborate setups for painting, and we're down to hand painting with a brush. So the first thing I'm going to do is pop open these launch bays that have been closed for oh so long, and these were just held on with a little bit of rubber cement. This one has a piece of tape because the rubber cement gave up the ghost. And uncovering these bays. Now I'm going to go and clean up any little rubber cement residue that might be on there. And then it's a question of mixing up some appropriate red that's got a little bit of a burgundy to it, that's a little bit deeper of a red. And I'm going to try to do this lettering by hand before I resort to the decals. These recessed tiers will get maybe a little going over with the Tamiya smoke to kind of grime up the recesses, and then I will dry brush the highlights. And I'm going to try something a little bit different. I'm going to add some little touches of some bronzes and some golds in there so that it's not all just silver metallics and gunmetal metallics and chrome metallics and, you know, everything on that end of the metallic spectrum, but has some other colors in it too. It looked like painting the lettering on was going to be the best solution. Now there's a little bit of cleanup I need to do under that P from the failed dry brushing attempt. And between the G and the A there's a little bit of touch-up that needs to be done, but I can do that with a little bit of smoke or some other staining color. But better than the decals, because then you don't get that ring around it that you sometimes get with decals, especially with that with all the contours. Those letters stick up a good chunk of distance, and getting the decals to settle down around every little thing might be more trouble than it's worth when I could just paint them on. But all the bays are open now. So paint the other name and then start working on the rest of the details. Here's the other one, and you can see it needs some cleanup as well, especially in that first S. Still a better, I think, better method than practically everything else. Easy enough to fix. I can backfill that. Like everything else on this ship, it was not done in one coat, and that's what really took me away from doing the dry brushing. I saw when I was dry brushing that I would have to do multiple passes with that to get the stark white that I'm really looking for, and that was not going to be conducive, because the more times you pass over something with a dry brush, the more chances you have to really screw it up. So I wanted to minimize that, so you hand paint it. And the details are really starting to come together now. I've got the red painted on the landing bay entries and exits, and the red stripe on front. They say dark red. I'm using a caboose red, but over top of the silver it darkens down quite nicely. And there'll be some cleanup. I got some overpaint because, you know, not a machine. And I got some goofs where I got red where I didn't want to get red, so let that dry good and well, and come back with one of the silvers and, you know, touch up next to it and clean up those edges. So now what I finally get to do after all this is dry, is put the guns on. The guns have been sitting in their little gunny sacks. They've been sitting in on top of their lovely sprues, and they are ready to be painted. Now what I'm going to do primarily before I even put them down is I'm going to paint the undersides of them, because once they're down they're never going to be able to be painted. So I'm going to paint the undersides of those, and while they're still in the sprue, and let them sit and dry while the red is drying, and then I'll come back and hit them all at once. Good morning. It is exciting day 3 on the final weekend build for the Pegasus. It is a holiday today in the United States. It is Martin Luther King Day, so being a good state employee, I have the day off. So what am I going to do? I am going to spend it finishing up this Pegasus. And if there's one lesson I've learned over the years, is if you really want to feel bad about your modeling, take a picture of your model, and then look at your picture on a computer screen where you blow up every single flaw and mistake that you've made. You think you've done something pretty darn good, and you take a picture of it, you put it on, and you put it on your computer, and it just magnifies every single stinking thing that you've done wrong. In this case, it was on the Pegasus name. I've painted those letters in, and they look pretty good. And I took a picture of it, and I could see where the white had just run all over the bottom of that lettering. So what I've done is taken my friend, the Comart transparent smoke. You could do the same thing with Tamiya, I'm sure. And I just ran a little tiny bead of it under the lettering. And what it did is the capillary action, use that scientific term whenever you can in parties to impress your friends. The capillary action of it pulled it up into the recesses and into the insides of letters and underneath, and it just sharpened up the painting tremendously. So now I have a nice sharp name there. I was looking at the decals, and I noticed that the decal sheet, it's tough to see there because it's white on light blue, includes the registry number for the Pegasus underneath that I guess that's 6562, or I'm sorry, BS 62. That's underneath the name. That is not part of the raised detail of the model, so I'm going to have to cut those little bits out and put them underneath the raised bits. I hope it's not too jarring to have painting and decal right next to each other. And then of course this big symbol that goes right there. Last night before I hit the pillow, I hit this with a nice gloss coat of a finish just in this area, so I could put the decal down on top of it. And today's project is to fit the guns. The guns I've painted separately on the trees to make them easier to handle. So I'm going to clip those off, clean them up a little bit. They were very smart in where they put the attachment point, because all those attachment points are going to be hidden back underneath. So even after I've cleaned them off a bit, I won't have to necessarily touch them with paint again. We'll see. And then it's time to pick at some final details and highlights and call this puppy done. I tell you, this transparent smoke is a wonder drug. I use it for everything. I highly recommend you buy it by the gallon. But another thing it does, like I said, it helped me neaten up that white. It also helps you neaten up the areas around this red, because once you've painted the red all over this nice mottled texture, it kind of stands out and looks very stark. So I just brushed some over top of the red here, and I'm going to go in with a dry brush and pull some off of the highlighted areas. And what that does is it gives you nice weathering. Okay, so you just pull that into the light. You can see what I'm doing. I'm just taking off, just blotting the high spots. And it, since that transparent smoke settles down into the recesses, it gives you a nice broken up, aged look, so that the red doesn't look quite as monolithic and ugly
or standouty. Yes, that's a technical term you can quote me on, standouty. But like I say, transparent smoke, whether you use Tamiya or Comart, it's a wonder. You will get a gallon of it and you will thank me later. Guns are in. More importantly, or equally importantly, but probably more flashily showy, is that the decals are on. And I topped them with a bit of Solvacet, because there's a whole bunch of recesses that this one needs to sink down into. And I added those small numbers underneath the painted registration. But now is the important time in the life of a Solvacet to leave it to frack alone, because this is very delicate. What it's doing now is melting the decal, and any jostling of the decal will cause it to rip or melt, and that's not what we want to have happen by any stretch. So while the glue on the guns is drying, this is a good time to let the decals dry, and I can walk away from it for a few hours and then come back. I did notice that when I put the guns in place, they do stand out a little bit too much for my liking. They are very chromy, and the rest of the ship is not. Well, the chromy because I wanted the rail portion of them to be chromy, the barrels, if you were. I wanted those to be chromy, but the bases of them are perhaps more chromy than they need to be. Here's a shot of them standing out on the deck. Now, it does help for you to see them standing out, but you can see where you might want to knock those down a little bit. So I think I'm going to touch the centers of those with another color to knock the color of those down. But you can really tell why it's a smart idea to leave those off till last, because you would be hard pressed to try to paint around those if you had glued them down to the deck and then tried to paint around them. I also questioned the placement of some of these guns. I understand that Pegasus was a big warship, but a lot of these guns seem to be in crossfire of themselves. Not a big amount of sweeping arcness to them. These ones I'm particularly curious about, because if the pilot's trying to land while there's guns shooting up at them, that could be a bit tricky. These ones, again, if you're shooting across your landing deck, that could be an interesting flight home. And some of these other ones where I think the barrels of them cross each other is a bit interesting. You can see where that's starting to suck down into the crevices. It's in that bad wrinkled stage that happens when you use Solvacet, and you really are tempted to go in and touch it and fix it, but that's exactly when you need to leave it alone. So let's step away from this for a while and come back in a bit. Okay, I backtrack a little bit. I am pleased to say that I am done with this. Outside of a final flat coat, I have gone in and touched up all the guns. I have put a couple different colors on the base. Didn't really spend a lot of time on it, but this popsicle that is the Pegasus, it be done. Did some highlighting since you last saw it, just some picking out details here and there, but willing to say, and after all the guns are on it, it makes it difficult to lay it down in ways you would have before, because you'll end up smacking these little barrels, so you really have to use the stand after a certain point. But I've tried to get back from it, but it's a big beast, and it's not easy to get all in frame. But one flat coat away from joining the rest of the fleet. So that'll be the final report on the Pegasus. I will show it maybe in a future report on something else, just to show you what the flat coat turned out, but not really cause for another whole video on it. So another ship down, and we're signing off from now. Oh, one last check. See how that decal is really sucking down into those crevices. So turn off. Well, usually I would turn. This is the point where I would turn off the lights and fire it up, but since this has no lighting of its own, I'll just have to try to show it off to its best event. There you go. There you go. With that, once I turn off that overhead light, or the fluorescent light, these are a truer version of what some of these colors look like inside. But sets. There you go. It's a satisfying little build. I'd have to wonder now if all that fuss I made about the panel lines was worth it, but you know, those are the things you learn.